Hi, this is the last video in the Sublime Spotify series, and this is the one that I promised you before the series started. The goal for this video is for me to finally stop preaching about the fact that the world of software development is indeed accessible to anyone. I'm not saying that it's easy or simple or free, in fact it's quite the opposite. But I'm also not saying that you need to be a genius to figure it out. The video you're watching right now was released on October 8, 2017, 5 months after I released my very first video in which I said that you need only 10 things to become a developer. 11. Right. 10 or 11 things. After this, together we wrote a production-ready, professional-grade software application and deployed it to a publicly accessible repository. It was a demonstration of how the advice that I have given you throughout the first series is applied in practice. I would also use it in the future as a reference to explain the fundamental concepts of computer science programming and software development. In this video, we will put all of this knowledge together just so that I can say I told you so. Let's get started. The second video was called What Are You Getting Yourself Into?, which corresponds to the point wanted. To summarize, I claim that developers earn a lot, find jobs with ease, are surrounded with opportunities, and generally have fun at work. That's all fine and dandy, but I also mentioned that programming and software development can be frustrating at times. In this section of the video, I would like to concentrate on the frustration part, which I will get to in about 30 seconds. The third video that I made was called What Makes You Tick?, which corresponds to the point learning. The video got too long, so I split it in two parts. The second part was called You Live, You Learn. All of these three videos are concentrating on the same topic. Frustration comes from not knowing, or to be more precise, not understanding things. Learning is a journey. It takes time and requires mistakes. I'm making this video to drive the point home that I am not different. And this point is significant. I mentioned it already in the past that when I'm watching YouTube tutorials, I have this feeling that the tutor in front of the camera is some sort of all-knowing expert, some sort of all-knowing oracle that will tell me everything about the topic in question. However, in reality, it's quite the opposite. It's people like you and me who realize at some point that they can do it by turning the TV off and learning and studying and fighting through the frustration against all the odds. Let me show you how the Spotify web plugin that we wrote together in this series was developed the very first time I built it, off the camera. So what you see here is a publicly available repository, but on my personal account. So it's under Agile Steel and not under Dev Inside You. And as you can see, it looks pretty much the same as the real one, because I wanted to make sure that I have everything figured out before starting recording. So it has 69 commits. Okay, so the first thing that I want to mention is that it was done by June 26th. After this, there were just a few things for the video. So let's go down. And this is not the very first one. We have to click on older. And there we go. Initial commit was on April 14th, and I'm recording this on September the 3rd. So the whole thing took me around 5 months, which means figuring out how Python works, figuring out how Spotify works, figuring out the whole Sublime plugin thing, doing all of this research and actually writing it. So from April 14 to June 26, which was May, June. Oh, that's it. So it took me like about 2 months. About 2 months to build it. So why I'm saying this not to brag or anything, because it actually took kind of long. I'm saying this that you could do too. So a regular span for a project like this should be around 1 full-time week, and you can get a prototype out in 1 weekend. So I obviously didn't have that because I have a regular job like everyone else, and after I came home, I was recording other videos for you guys. So I had maybe 1 hour a day, like in average. So what we're going to do now is I'm just going to tell you a little story how it was built. So when I came up with the idea for the plugin, I just knew that it is possible to write something in the status bar because I've seen other plugins do that. So for example, I have a plugin called Status Bar Time over here, and it displays the time in the status bar. So I knew that it exists, so I found its code, which is what the Sublime developer documentation suggests to do anyway, and I found the code. And I found somewhere here it was getting the active window, and then getting the view, and then view set status, and there's some sort of key and there's some sort of value, right? So at this point I already knew, okay, this is some sort of dictionary, some sort of map. You just have to give it some key, and there are views involved. So is the status bar of the view and not of the window. So at this point I knew, okay, so I need to abstract it away somehow. And this is what I did probably. Let's see. So the very initial commit is probably boring. It's the one that was created by GitHub. Yeah, so it's just to git ignore, the license, and yeah, and that's it. So let's close it again. Let's close that. And then I added the status bar manager CRUD. So what was that? Yeah, so I tried to abstract it away. There was this key, and that would be a write and a read and a delete. And as you have seen in the final version, it's not called like that. It's not called like that. It's not called like that. It's everything is sort of different, sort of cleaned up. There are no comments that we commit. I started writing tests, so I just copy pasted the getting started test from the Station library that we were using, and it was taking care that it was also working for the Sublime version 2. Was doing like some weird stuff here, and yeah. So all I'm saying is that it did not end up in production, not like this at least. And so this is what you usually do. When you're starting a project, you just build a prototype and see is it actually going to work, and you smash just everything together in one file. And as long as everything works, you just know, okay, it's going to be ready. And this is this this 80-20 rule. This 20% of the time is needed to build the actual thing, but the 80% is needed to do all the details around it, to all the settings manager, and making sure that the user experience is great, all of this stuff. So then these are like the commit messages are typical for a prototype. You just commit some random stuff, work in progress or refactoring, first all-in-one working thing. It's just not for anyone to read. It's just for you to keep track of this stuff. So let's see, work in progress. What did I do there? Oh, all right. So I added cache token to the git ignore. So which means that at this point I was already, building the server and building the client. And the server looks sort of similar, but it uses like lambdas with like 1, 2, 3 parameters and some weird stuff here. Let's see. Look, there's a file called script. All right, because in the beginning I was trying to make it work outside of Sublime. Right, I just new to Python. I just wanted to see is it gonna work like outside of Sublime, and then I had this perfect architecture in mind. I thought I would just put it in and it's just gonna work, and then I realized, hey, this whole dependency management thing is not gonna work. So I needed to figure out how do you do that in Sublime. Right, was this package manager can pull stuff down, or do you just copy stuff? Like I'm not used to copying source code from some other library into mine, because I'm used to things like Java and Scala, where you have compiled binaries. So there's no you have some tool that downloads it for you and things like this, but it doesn't download the code, it downloads the binaries. So I wasn't really comfortable with this idea of having someone else's code in my code base. I felt like I'm sort of stealing it, let's see. Yeah, so see, I had like hard-coded, tokens that were committed to this is an open repository, like anybody can go there and, steal these tokens, which don't exist anymore, by the way. Because you don't care about things like this when you're building a prototype. Let's see, refactoring. Probably it's boring. Yeah, just some cleanup, renames here. So I renamed Spotify redirect URI handler to authentication.py, which also did not end up in production. Yeah, just a lot of refactorings, boring. Let's see, first all-in-one working thingy. That sounds promising. All right, so I removed lib from gitignore, so at this point I probably realized that I need to download Spotify, and I did, and I had Spotify run, and I gave it everything, and it probably had a loop. And look, there's also some settings already. Yeah, so this is a big div. This is where requests is added, and there's probably one more where Spotify is added. What's that? This is probably the license. Yeah, it's a license from requests. So see, like for example, in the beginning, I just downloaded requests. I didn't even know that package control could download things. All right, that's huge. Hold up. Yeah, that's requests. It's basically all of this is not my code. It just added a bunch of code. Yeah, whatever. Let's see further. Refactoring, exception handling. Let's see. Right. So I just started going through critical places where, where we go to the REST API, or where we get the settings, and just adding like randomly, try and accept blocks, and yeah, try, edit debugging messages, things like this. So you know what? Actually, I'm gonna stop with this, because I just wanted to drive this point home that prototypes are built differently, and when you develop a project the first time, it's completely different from what it ends up when it's actually perfectly done. So the point is this: like, don't stress, right? I had this for a very long time, that I was like, okay, after like 10 years of developing, I would just be able to take a task and just write it down top to bottom. Never happens. You get stuck all the time. You write some code, you throw it away. It just never works. That's it. Back to the original video. As you can see, it was built quite differently off the record compared to how it was shown in the tutorial. And this is precisely what I want you to take away from this video. I used to have this idea in my head that with a lot of practice, one day I will be able to write code as perfectly as those legendary people who create these tutorials. It took me quite some time to convince myself that there is no way to write perfect code the first time you write it. Before that, I was torturing myself with thoughts like, I'm not good enough, I'm never gonna figure this out, I'm not smart enough. Bullshit. I made 23 videos, which cost me 5 months of my life, to help you understand that it's okay to make mistakes and it's okay to feel frustrated. So instead of victimizing yourself and researching terms like the imposter syndrome, Google this instead. The hacker mentality. Find it and convince yourself, like I did, that you, like everyone else, have it in you to accomplish whatever your heart desires. Would you be surprised to find out that this plugin was the very first plugin that I have written for anything in my entire life? Would you be surprised to find out that I have never written a single line of Python code before? I haven't read any books about it, and no lecture in the 5 years of university that I had ever even mentioned Python. I knew what Auth 2 was, but I've never written even a single line of code that used it in one way or the other. Hacker mentality. Google it. Okay, we're not done with my list, so let's get going. The videos 5 through 7 were about reading, typing, and English in general. I had to read a lot of documentation, a lot of code taken from other plugins of sublime-text, blogs and tutorials, but as I already mentioned, I haven't read any books. There's not much that I can say about typing, but as I already mentioned before, my keyboard is not the best for typing, as you might have seen in this series. Also, it's mechanical, so I hope it wasn't too loud. Sorry. The 7th video is about how to market yourself as a developer, in which I mentioned that the best way to do this on any level of your journey is to leave traces all over the internet, because the internet never forgets. The plugin we wrote is on package controlled with around 30 downloads and on GitHub, which shows who wrote it. Both sites link to the YouTube playlist that you're watching right now, which is on my YouTube channel. The series was mentioned in the Python Weekly mailing list. Shout out to Raul again, who helped me double the number of subscribers. The first video in this playlist has been watched around 500 times, which is a huge number for a YouTube channel that has been around for only a few months. And if it wasn't enough, ever since I started this YouTube channel, my mailbox was getting fuller with not only regular recruitment emails, but also emails from giants like Amazon, Google, Facebook, Twitter, and so on. The 9th video was about avoiding dev wars. I can't say much about it except for the fact that I try to do my best to respect Python's convention instead of imposing my own only because I'm used to something else. The videos 10 through 12 were about caring. I was taking care of my career by learning new skills. I took care about others by contributing to the Spotify, Sublime, and Python communities. And I took care about the code by respecting and committing to the project as if I was paid to build it. By the way, contrary to popular belief, being paid is not what defines a professional. But this is a topic for another video. On top of all of this, I just want to say that I had a lot of fun building and recording it. I hope you liked it. Let me know what I can do better in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and stay safe. Oh, and before I go, I'm incredibly glad to point out that there are only 2 places in the entire codebase that only remotely resemble math. And furthermore, it's the kind of math that any 6-year-old kid could have written. So without any further ado, I told you. What did I tell you? Didn't I tell you? 'Cause I told you. And when did I tell you? A long time ago. And what did I say will happen when I told you? Exactly what just happened.